back, sewists, to the Love Notions Melody Dolman Top Part 2. In last week's episode, we went over the entire pattern, looked at the directions. I showed you some of the pattern alterations that I'm making. We also talked about the full bust pattern that is included. We cut everything out, talked about grain line, did some interfacing. We started sewing it together all the way to getting the collar made. So all of that is last week's episode, which is part 1, and it will be linked in the description below. This week we're going to finish sewing up this shirt. It's so cute. So let me tell you a few little things before we get started. And this is in last week's video, but it's important for this week. When we made the collar, it has you cut the notch to turn up for the collar. There's a little area across the center back of the collar, and they have you cut it 1/2 inch, but we sew it at 3/8. And I found on my pattern that 1/8 of an inch mattered, and there was a little bit of fiddliness in there. I was a little worried about fraying and also that it shows. And if I were doing it again, I would only cut it as far as 3/8 of an inch personally. Also, I pressed my shoulder seam the wrong direction. I normally, and is sort of standard, that seams all flow to the back. You press everything to the back unless otherwise noted or for a specific reason. And in this pattern, they have you press the shoulder seam to the front with good reason. However, I didn't read all the way through and pay close attention to realize what that good reason was, and I didn't realize it till this week when we're putting the collar on. So you will see me ripping out a little bit and fixing it. So you get to see my epiphany on this and why we fix it. So that's in this week's video. It's also why it's a little longer, because I show me fixing my mistake. Press your shoulder seams to the front. The other thing is the pocket. I put a pocket on mine. There is a little marking on the pattern for pocket placement, which I completely forgot to transfer when I traced my pattern off. So when I went to put my pocket on, I didn't have it anywhere, and I sort of eyeballed it. I went and tried it on and made my pocket placement. So I just want to put that caveat. It's the very last part of their directions. So after the whole shirt is done, then they talk about the pocket. The best way to put a pocket on is before you put the shoulder seams together. So if you're going to make this and you want to do the pocket, is look at that last direction. Before I sew anything, I'm going to put the pocket on. It's going to make your life so much easier. But I show it in this week after the shoulder seams are together. I add it then instead of waiting till the very end and the garment's completely together. Enough talking, let's get sewing. Okay, so we have got our beautiful little collar, and you can see how everything shadows through. This is why I chose not to turn under, see here's the shoulder, this front edge of the facing and stitch it. It's just more shadowing through that I don't want, because this is a pretty sheer fabric. Now against the body, it's not going to be as noticeable, but don't want it. We are going to take right side of the under collar. So our interfaced piece is going to get sewn to neckline. This little area right here, this where the T marking was, is our shoulder. So we're going to mark that, put shoulder to shoulder, and pin it down. So we're starting at our 2 little shoulder seams, and we're going to pin those. Now next is center back, and I do not have it marked on my shirt, so the easy way to do that is match your seams and pull out the shirt till it meets. That's my center back. You can put a clip in it, which is usually what I do. And I'm going to match that to the center back. And the way this works, when we go to sew it, now the collar comes, I do not have a marking for where the collar ends on this. I'm sure it ends before the interfacing, however. Yes, okay. So there should be a marking that I neglected. So I'm going to pin these down, and I'm going to make sure they're even on both sides. There is a marking here on the shirt that says where the collar ends. So you want to go up to that marking, pin it down on both sides. This is where the stay stitching really helps. We're going to stitch this. I'm going to double check, but because this has got a 1/2 inch, it had us pull up and everything else was 3/8. So I'm going to double check our seam allowance on this real quick. I can't imagine it would be a 1/2 inch on the neckline. Usually it's less on the neckline, but we'll find out. Okay, so I have pinned my collar on so far. right side of the shirt to the under collar, so our right side of under collar. So this is my upper collar that's showing. Now that that's pinned on, we're going to take our facing and we're going to find that fold line right next to our interfacing. So I'm going to fold right next to that interfacing. Here's my interfacing. And that is going to fold back and close our collar. The area that ends from the collar that goes into the facing makes the little notch on the collar. So from the inside, here's collar. The facing is folded back. Here's our facing. It folds back onto, here's our little, the shoulder of the facing that's flipped down. It's enclosing that collar, and we are stitching at 3/8. I double checked. Now the big thing you want with this is you do not want your notches to be uneven. So you want to measure that you are the same on the right collar and the left collar in that notch area. And if you're not, that's where we need to make an adjustment before we ever sew. I'm going to get my little ruler and I'm going to measure from collar to fold. Okay, so that's before you sew it. Make sure that you have the same distance from end of collar to fold. Here's my center back. So you can see I've got it pinned together. This is what it looks like on the right side. When we stitch, we're going to end up stitching just below this fold line. It is 3/8, so we're going to have an 1/8 of an inch difference between these two. Don't love that, but that's the way they chose to do it, and we're going with it. Once we hit our fold line and we start coming back, I'm just pulling out pins and repositioning them through all the layers. And then once I get one side done, I'm going to go to the other side and I'm going to make sure that and see, this should line up right with that line so it doesn't cross over if we folded it right. And it's really easy to refold that right there if we didn't. Okay, so one side is all pinned in and we can stitch right on top of our basting line here. So that's helps us know where to fold to. Oh, I got to get this corner down. We're ready to sew it in. Now, you know what I did not see on that front was where the pocket placement goes. I cut out the pocket, but I don't remember seeing a pocket placement on there at all. I'll have to read the directions because we haven't put our pocket on. Normally, the pocket goes on before you ever put anything together. Your shirt's nice and flat, and it's very easy to pin it and arrange it and sew it in without all the rest of the garment being in the way. We have not done that. I'm thinking now, as I'm working on the collar, we have got our we're going to sew this at 3/8. I'm sewing with the collar side up where I can see what I'm doing. Make sure you have a regular stitch length. I'm going to make sure this little corner is good. Also making sure right here that my collar is not falling down. When you have narrow seam allowance and you're working on something as fiddly as a collar, the 1/8 of an inch is going to matter. Normally I pull up my pins as I go, but this time I'm being kind of careful and leaving them in. So if I hold this up, there's our this is the under collar. You can see how nice it looks. I have no little pooks or foldovers or anything. It looks fine. I just need to take out some of my stay stitching that I did on the collar. So we're going to now take this seam allowance. So here's our seam allowance. This is going to get pushed up into the collar. I'm going to double check the directions to make sure this is how they want it. But this, we'll press this up. This is going to come down and we're going to top stitch just this little under collar part only. And put a few pins in it so you can see. I'm going to turn it and lay it flat like this so that it's easier to work on. And we will be stitching. You can see they had us fold up a 1/2 inch, but we only have 3/8 inch seam allowance. Not my favorite. I would have folded it up 3/8 and then just pulled it. I'm actually going to give this a little tug because I don't want my collar to pull funny. And I want to cover this as much as possible, so we don't have issues. We're about ready to sew this. Okay, so collar is pinned in. We are going to give it a haircut real quick. I have not removed any stay stitching, and it's not essential to remove it until I'm done and I'm ready to wear it, really. Yeah, I get now why they press that to the front. And the other thing with pressing it to the front is that you can enclose that seam allowance. Let me show you. So here we are ready to stitch this. If I had pressed this seam to the front, like they recommend, when you enclose this, see how it completely encloses all of that? And because I went rogue, mine does not enclose. I don't really have to worry about serging any of this. The only thing I'm going to make sure is I don't need to clip it. And I think I do. I'm looking at this. Can you see how this kind of pulls? I think it might need a few little clips to make it lay nice, because I have a straight edge collar and a curvy neckline. And so usually you have to do a little clipping to release that collar area, the straight collar, so that it takes the shape of the neckline. But before we do that, let's come over here to our straight stitch. This is my collar right here. And I am lining up this folded edge of the collar. I'm using my foot. And I could flip this over and do this on the right side. This is my concern with how it's so far away from the, it's a little high. Like normally when you stitch this, it is 1/16 of an inch. This is going to be a good 1/8 of an inch from that stitching line. I want to sink my needle, make sure everything else is out of the way. I'm going to sink my needle right here. And I hope you can see how close. Let me get a pin. Let me get a pointer pin for you. This is my folded edge. That folded edge is right against this inside part of my foot. Now, everybody's feet are different. Everyone's machine's going to be different. For me, this is how I do it to make sure I get as close as possible. Do a couple stitches. This will not get crossed, so you want to back stitch here. Now this stitching line that we're doing, what I'm doing right here is going to be against your neck, and then what on the other side, which is the bobbin side, is going to be underneath the collar. So it's really not going to be seen that much, but you want to make it as tidy as possible. Can you hear this? That noise is I hit, oh, see this thread I didn't trim? It's pulled itself up under my foot. Let me get rid of it. There we go. I hit a pin earlier and I'm hearing a popping noise. That means I need to change the needle. Okay, when I get through with this line, I'm going to change my needle. This little pin head, can you see it's going under the foot? I didn't have it pulled out far enough. That can cause a problem. Okay, here's my other clips. This is where we're going to stop. Okay, time to inspect our work. So this is the back side. This is the under collar, or the right side of the garment. So there you can see it. I need to trim my threads. This is the inside, which is against our neckline. Future Stacy here, and I want to tell you, press your seams forward. You will be seeing in the future me fixing it. And I don't see it until I am almost through with the collar why they do it. Press your seam forward. There is a reason, and it'll just make your life a little easier. You 100% can put this in with the seam pressed to the back, but it does change the way it's finished on the inside a little bit. So just do it the way they say. Don't go rogue. Don't go rogue like I did. Most of the time when I go rogue, I'm glad I did. This is the time where I'm like, probably shouldn't have. So that's my little caveat. Back to the present. As I'm sitting here fiddling with this, I have made an executive decision. I'm going to show you on this side. I'm going to come out I'm going to press it to the front, just like the pattern says, like a ding-a-ling. I didn't do it. I'm going to be removing quite a few stitches just in this area. I don't have to take the whole thing apart. I'm just going to press forward and re-stitch that area and then do a little bit of stitching here. So I'm going to fix my issue. I'm going to start by unpicking my top stitching. Okay, so that's released. And now I need to come in just a few more stitches. Sorry, I keep hitting the camera right here. Okay, now that's released. All that's left now is this little bit that's holding it down. This is, if you saw my like 10 tips video, or it was more than that, my sewing tips, sewing habits, and in it I said, only unstitch what you need to, like don't unsew the whole thing for a small amount, and this is one of those. You don't have to take the whole collar off. You just have to untake a little bit. So now that will fall forward. I'm going to push this forward. Voila. Excellent. Okay, I've got a little thread holding that down. Boop. Okay. So now that that is pulled forward, I'm going to restitch this little area with this out of the way. I'm only stitching this part. See, all the collar and everything is out of the way otherwise. So I'm just going to restitch that part only. And the rest I can get with the top stitching. Make sure my seam allowance is to the front now. Okay. Now, this is where we're at. Here's my piece that's going to get back stitched against. So now I'm going to pull this down. We're going to re-back stitch this corner, and I'll compare the two. I'll show you the one that I haven't redone yet. And now see how all of this gets put inside and taken care of. Now, this is the thing that always gives me the pause. Can you see how it wants to, they did a 1/2 inch cut and then a 3/8 inch stitch. And this is where you can start to get some fraying. So I'm going to pull this down as close as I can. And we're going to stitch a little extra to make sure. Okay. Back in my old stitching line. I'm going to line up my threads. There we go. And I want to make sure I get this nice and tight and it's protected. You can see right there, it kind of wants to already start coming apart. And that's just the nature of cutting it a little deeper than we're sewing it. I definitely, if I sew this again, will only cut at 3/8. I'm a little anxious about it. All right, so here's the right side collar stitched in. Here is our facing. Now I haven't pressed it back over. I need to press this, but this is going to fold over and cover all of that. And I will just come in with my machine and lift this up and do a little bit of stitching. You don't have to do a ton to hold it, or you can come in and hand slip stitch it down. I'm going to put a pin in it. So that's how it looks if you sew it the way they plan. I've got to remove all of my extra stay stitching. Here is what happens if you do what I did. And you could 100% leave it and just stitch it. Like, you don't have to take it apart and redo it. But if you do it the way I do it, you're just going to have this seam showing. That's the difference. I'm going to go ahead and fix this one so that they're even. I don't want one to the front and one to the back. So I'm going to go ahead and do this one the way I just did the other one. And then I'll show you how I'm going to stitch this down with the seam pressed forward. I'm ready to finish off this little facing on the inside, but before I do, I did decide to go ahead and serge off just the rest of that neckline. That's going to be inside the facing, but it does two things. It makes sure we don't get any fraying right out here at the edge, because you can see it's going to want to do that, and it compresses all of those seams together. So here's the one that I haven't done yet, and here's the one that I just did, and it does compress it nicely. Once you've done that, okay, so here's the inside of our garment. Our facing is coming towards the seam here. So I'm going to take my seam allowance of the facing and the seam allowance seam allowance at the shoulder. I'm going to kind of line them up and pinch them together. And I'm going to fold all of this out of the way. And now I can stitch those to each other. We don't have to stitch very far. The point of this is just to get the facing to stay down. I'm going to put a pin in it so it stays together till I get it to the machine. And you don't have to sew the whole seam. It could be half an inch or an inch. It's literally to hold the facing in place. So I'm going to flip it over so I can see the shoulder seam. There we are. All right, so I'm going to stitch in the same seam line I stitched in before, holding those two things together. Just stitch till it's comfortable. I'll flip this back around, now it's attached. See how it's on there. It's not going anywhere. It's going to make that facing stay in place. I still can come in if I need to. I can access this seam allowance if I need to come in and do some clipping. I think it's going to be fine, however. I've pressed this already, and this is going to actually fold back to form the collar like that. So I think we're good, other than I need to remove stay stitching and stuff like that. We are now ready we finished the collar, we finished our facing, we're ready to do our side seams and our cuff. This is how the collar looks stitched. This is underneath. The collar is going to fold over, you won't see that. This is it on the inside. I do have some stay stitching I need to remove, but that's the inside. I just need to finish this side like this one. But you can see now that facing's not going to go anywhere. Because this does form part of the collar, I think if I were going to make this again, I probably would face that entire facing, potentially. Okay, let's talk pocket. Well, I just threw the shirt over my shoulders and marked placement. Pockets go on the left. That's the traditional place for pockets. If you're right-handed and you're going to put something in your pocket, it's more convenient. However, there's no rule that says if you're left-handed and want a right-sided pocket, you can't have one, because it makes perfect sense. I grew up with a mom, a dad, and an older sister who are all left-handed, and I remember very vividly, like, lots of things just were a little more clunky or not as convenient because they were lefties. But if you would like to move it to the other side, do it. It makes perfect sense. So I have just thrown it over my shoulder. I have made a little mark where I'm going to put one corner and line it all up. But before that, I need to make my pocket. So I folded the pocket edge over right sides together, fold it over my little pocket edge. This is my right side, and I'm just going to sew 3/8 of an inch right here. That's going to give me the start of a nice even edge of pocket. Then I'll fold back all those seam allowances and we'll top stitch it on. I was so busy sewing, I didn't realize my camera was shooting off to the corner. We are going to now we're going to flip this around, and we're going to press it all around, and then we'll come back and top stitch this down, and that will be our little pocket. One more thought on the pocket is it's one pocket size for extra small through 5XL, and I'm just telling you, this is kind of a small pocket the larger you get, and it would not hurt if you wanted to wear a pocket to size it up a little bit to keep the ratio of pocket to front of garment. Otherwise, you could have a large front garment with a little tiny pocket swimming out there in the middle, and you may not want that. You may want to size up just a wee bit to keep the ratio appropriate. I'm going to press under all my seam allowance, and then I'll show you how we stitch it on. Are all pressed, and I'm just going to come and do a straight stitch across here. All right, now we're going to pin it on. Went over and just put a pin in the corner where I want my pocket to start. Just put some corner pins in, because we actually start at the stitching line on this. So I'm going to start on this corner right there, about 1/8 of an inch in. I'm going to sink my needle so I have mobility to maneuver, and I'm going to come up at an angle. So I'm making a little arrow, sort of come across like 2 stitches and then go down, and we're going to do the same thing on the other side, but we will finish with the arrow, where on this side we're starting with the arrow. You can see why this would be easier if you had not already put your garment together at the shoulders, but this is still going to work. Now I'm really watching my gingham here, because it tells your secrets. You've got these nice straight lines that tell you if you've made a mistake. So I'm really watching that I don't dip too much. So see how this curves out? We don't really want that to happen. So I'm going to actually pull this whole thing over, because I can press this later. The bias will just readjust. Okay, we have got a little pocket, and I see right here I stitched right off, so I'm going to come back and fix this little area, and we can finally finish our garment. That's what we're going to do next. Let me fix this real quick. I'm going to take out just a couple stitches. I'm going to take out at each end that I need to remove it from, and then it's very easy to pull out in between. Okay. Now, whenever you're preparing a top stitching like this, start in your old stitching line and line up your stitches. So I'm making sure I'm right in that old stitching line. I'm going to finish in my old stitching line, and then I can just trim threads. There we are, much happier. Okay, let's move on. All right, I just adjusted my overlock so that when I make my next seam, it will actually be at 3/8 of an inch. So I don't have to straight stitch and then serge. However, that may not be the case for everyone. And if you can't get your serger to do a 3/8 inch wide seam, then straight stitch it first, then come over and overlock, or zigzag that edge, or bias bind it, or there's lots of ways you can seam finish. Overlocking is easy, but so is zigzagging. It's just never quite as neat. I just don't think it's quite as tidy. So I'm putting a few pins in. I'm pinning so that I can easily pull the pins out, because you never want a pin to go through your overlock. The knife will cut through it, but it's dangerous and it's bad for the knife. We have right sides together, so you can see here's my inside hanging down. We're going to do right sides together, do both of our underarm seams, and then we're going to do our cuffs. And after I get the underarm seam, I'm going to go ahead and serge the hemline. And I'll show you that when I get to it, because we're going to do a little trick with that facing that helps enclose that hem when we serge it. So we're going to do that too, since we're going to already be at the overlock. I have one other thought. when I went over and tried it on, I didn't really try it on, but I draped it over my shoulders to get the pocket placement. I am very concerned this is too small. And I'm certain that is an error I made, but I don't know where, because I did check my measurements and so I obviously did make a mistake. We'll see. I'll try it on, and it could just be the perception because it's loose. It's not tied anywhere. It's not stitched, but I am concerned that it may not fit me the way I want, and we may be looking at this on the dress form at the end, and not on me. we will see. So let's go ahead and serge this real quick, or straight stitch and then serge, depending on your machine. I always sew with the right side up or the front up, because I press my seams to the back. That won't work, however, at the shoulder seam, because the shoulder seam gets pressed to the front. But oh, that looks lovely. Just checking my seam. Okay, go ahead and do the other one. All right, now I'm going to come here to the hemline. This is the facing as it was folded down, and we're going to flip it around on that fold line and pin it, and we're going to do that on both sides so that when I serge, I'm self-enclosing that facing at the hemline. Then when we flip it around, this part of the hem is going to flip back up inside. So now I'm going to serge the hem with that facing flipped around. So now that we've done that, when we flip this around, it finishes off that facing and it folds up the hemline for us so that it's easier later on when we come back to hem. It's already got kind of started for us. So you can see how that finishes off the front of that shirt. It's all self-enclosed, and it makes it look nice. All right, now that we've got all of that done, it could use a good pressing again. I'm going to trim out this serging in here. We don't want all that bulky serging. I'm going to give it a little, I'm leaving a few tails, but trimming it off. Now we're going to make our cuffs. We're just going to start by sewing them together, right sides together for each cuff, and making a little circle, 3/8 of an inch. It's bias, it will stretch, so I'm going to be very careful. All right, now that we've done that, we're going to go press open that little seam. We're going to press this open, and then we're going to fold it up and press it. I've pressed open my little seam, and now I'm folding it in half. I'm using my tailor's ham. You might have, there's lots of pressing tools made for things like this. That's a circle. You just don't want to crease it anywhere but this edge so that we make a nice little circle out of it. And it's a cuff ready to go on. And this is a true cuff. It's going to fold up and make an actual cuff. So we're just going to carefully press all the way around. It's bias, so I'm being really careful not to stretch it out. If you don't have a ham, you can fold it in half and carefully press, and just never press these corners, and just keep gently rotating and pressing till you get it perfect. You just want to make sure your cut edges are laying on top of each other and don't stretch it out. We have two nice little cuffs made, and we're going to now take the cuff to the shirt. We're doing right side cuff to the inside of the shirt, or the wrong side of the shirt. Take my cuff, and I'm going to the underarm here. I'm lining up the cuff seam to the underarm seam. Make sure all those cut edges are happy and laying on top of each other. Put in a pin, and then we're going to just gently pull the cuff out to meet. I'll just pin it in. It fits just right, so it goes in real easy. Here's my shoulder seam. All right, we're ready to head over to the serger and stitch it in. And we want to start stitching at the underarm. We're not serging off any seam allowance. We're just going to let the knife go right along the edge. Here's our little cuff that we just sewed, and then I'm going to grab the cuff from the inside. So here's my shoulder seam, and you can see the seam right there. Here's the seam out here, and that whole cuff pulls out and flips around just like that. And we just need to give it a press. And when we press it, we're just going to make sure that we press so that the seam does not peek over. And if you have issues with your cuff coming undone, you can do a little stitching from behind at each seam to kind of hold it in place if you need to. Here's our cuff all pressed in place. Super cute. I do think I might come in from behind and just do a little hand stitch in the seam to the back side of the cuff. That'll just keep it in place so it doesn't flip over. I'll do one at the top and the bottom, and that should be enough. And now I'm just pressing up the hem, and it has a 1/2 inch available. So you could sew this 1/2 inch here, fold up the 1/2 inch and stitch it. I'm just turning up about 3/8. Pressing, it presses up nice and easy, and then I'm just going to flip it over and top stitch it in. So that's what I'm doing now. So I'm getting ready to put in the hem. After that, we'll mark buttonholes and buttons. All right, we're ready to put in our hem. I am starting right at the end of my facing. I don't have to stitch in this area, and I'm going to leave it alone because it is the very front of the garment. I'm just going to start beyond, right at the edge of the facing. It catches the facing, holds it in place, and then stitch from there. You can start at the front if you want to. And if you love to hop stitching, you could stitch down the entire facing and around, like you can do as much as you want. I'm doing just a 1/4 inch. Whenever top stitching, you want the right side up and the wrong side towards the bottom. Feel my facing right here. All right, we are hemmed. All that's left now is to mark for our buttonholes and our buttons. This is your button guide, and you could trace this off and lay it on top of your shirt to mark, or you can just measure how far apart they recommend the buttons. Usually buttonholes and buttons are an odd number, so in this case they have 5. The other thing I would recommend is checking on your own body. I find that if you're busty at all, if you have a buttonhole above and below the bust, but not one at the bust, you get gapping. So you may need to readjust your buttonholes according to your bust line, put them closer together, or just change where they are completely. So I'm checking what they're doing, and I'm going to put some pins, but I'm also going to put it on my body real quick and make sure I have a button right here at this level so that I don't have any gapping issues in my shirt. So I'll be back in a minute after I work on that for a minute. Got to figure out my buttonhole placement, and I'll show you. All right, so this is the right side of my garment. Normally, women's clothing close right over left, so this is the side the buttonhole will go on. The left side will get the button, but I've placed the button here so you can see how I've done it. They're 3.5 inches apart. You can do the buttonholes from front to, or from side to side, or up and down. I think I'm going to do mine up and down. It's very easy to do. The main thing when placing buttonholes is, according to the size of your button, You want the buttonhole, let's say my buttonhole starts right here. When the button is in it, it's going to pull over. So you always want to make sure you have plenty of room for the button when it's pulled against that buttonhole to come across. If you put your buttonhole too close to the edge, when you put your button on, it's going to peek over the edge. So you always want to have plenty of room that doesn't happen. So I'm going to go straight up and down on this. It's 1/2 inch about from the edge because I have a 1-inch placket. And I also have, my buttons are about, they look to me about, they're between 1/2 and 5/8 is my guess. Yep, just almost exactly 5/8, just under. So that's my little buttons. So I'm going to set up my machine for buttonholing. All right, I'm going to change out the foot on my machine. This is my even feed foot, so I'm going to pop it up out of the way. And then this is the sewing machine foot, and they have a little lever right here on the side that drops it right off. Put on my buttonhole foot, and we're ready to go. Other thing I'm going to do is put this thread through so it's under the foot. Now I'm going to go to my machine and I'm going to choose buttonhole. I'm just going to go for the regular buttonhole. I need to look to see what's the difference between 51 and 52. Now that I'm getting it to the machine, I can line up. I can see my pin and my little dot right underneath there so I can get it lined up. I'm going to bring this all the way over to the 5/8 inch just because I want to make sure I have plenty of room. My machine, when I get to the length I want, I hit the reverse button and it memorizes it. So after that, I don't have to measure for length anymore. I just have to measure where I want to start. The length needs to be at least the length of your button, which is what this little red thing is on my machine. I'm going to put this right here so I know when to stop. It should be the length of your button plus the depth of your button. So since I have a 5/8 inch button and it's about 1/8 of an inch thick, that is almost a 3/4 inch length. Sometimes they go just a tiny bit shorter if the fabric's real soft, or it just depends. Okay, I'm going to get rid of my pin, and away we go. So I'm watching this little red line. When it gets to my arrow, I hit the reverse button. And it's done. And there is one buttonhole. And I'm just going to line up for the next one. Okay, now that that's done, I just have to cut open my buttonholes and give everything a haircut. You can do a couple things when you're working on your buttonholes, depending on your fabric. Sometimes I will glue from behind. I'll get some fabric glue, a very small amount, but I will glue the little button threads or buttonhole threads before I cut it open. And what that does is it prevents any problems like your buttonhole coming apart. It also prevents excess fraying. If you have a fabric that really frays, even with the buttonhole in place, once you cut it open, sometimes it'll fray right through the buttonhole. So a little fabric glue might be what you need. Now we do have interfacing back there, which is also helpful. Also, the way you cut open your buttonhole matters, so be really careful. Like you can use your seam ripper. I know a lot of people enjoy the seam ripper. The other thing that you can use but this is an actual little chisel for cutting open buttonholes. It's about 1/2 inch wide. So if you have really narrow buttonholes, it won't work. And it has a little self-healing mat. Sometimes they come with a wooden block, and you just line your chisel between the little legs and punch down, which is what I'm getting ready to do. But if you accidentally hit a thread, your buttonhole comes apart. So you just have to be really, really careful. I don't love cutting open buttonholes with a seam ripper. The potential for accidentally ripping right through the end of your buttonhole is great. A lot of people will take a pin So you put a pin at the top of the buttonhole, and then when you're seam ripping, if you hit the pin, you can't go any farther. And that is a protection. I don't love it. I definitely do use my seam ripper at times to cut open buttonholes, but it is not my favorite. So I'm going to show you real quick how to use the little chisel on a buttonhole. I've only trimmed to the back threads. Let me trim off a front thread here. So now we're down to just a beautiful little buttonhole. I've not glued or anything. We've got this super sharp chisel. This is going to go right into between the legs. So it's right between those legs, and then missing the each end. And then I'm just going to push down, and you can actually hear the threads cutting, the threads of the fabric, not of the buttonhole. So here's my seam ripper. I'm going to put a pin in it before I start. I'm on the wrong side. You could do it from either side, but I'm on the wrong side because of the way that the bobbin pulls. It makes it real easy. Okay, so there were just a few little threads holding that together after I used the chisel. And there it is. I'm going to cut all of these open, and then we will sew on our buttons. You can machine sew them on, or you can hand sew them on, depending on what you're sewing. If it's a pre-shanked button, you have to hand sew those. If it is a flat button with holes, then you might have the little foot to sew them on at the machine. So I will show that too. And then I will give it a press, and we will look at the final garment. So I'm going to now switch my foot once again. On my machine, it's number 60 to sew on the buttonhole, and then I got to get the right foot. It has its own special little foot, which is on the Bernina an 18, and it looks like this. You see the little tongue sticking out? It zigzags over that tongue when it's doing the button. So as soon as I get this trimmed up, I will get my buttons marked, and we will put in the buttons. I have all my buttonholes marked with pins, or my buttons marked with pins, and the pin helps me know where to line up the center of the button. And then I have got my special little foot here, and before I start sewing, I've selected what I'm going to be stitching on. I make sure that my needle doesn't hit the button. I just always double check that I have it lined up properly. I have a 4-hole button, so I'm going to be stitching twice. I'm going to stitch in both sets, in 2 sets of holes. I'm going to get rid of my pin now. When you choose the little buttonhole marking, it drops the feed dogs while it's working, so it doesn't try and push your fabric through. It is sort of like a darning stitch. It stays in one place. I'm going to hang on to my threads, and I'm going to go slow to make sure I don't hit anything. And you can see how it makes a little mound over the this little pin right here, and that it's sort of like a thread shank. Now that I've done that one, I'm going to pull it off. I should have done the front one first. If I was thinking, I would have done that. I'll do it next time, and we're going to do it again. And the machine automatically stops, and now I have a sewn on button, and it's good and sturdy. It's fine. I don't think it's quite as pretty as if you hand stitched it. This is what it looks like from behind, and I often will pull all of my threads to the back and tie them together on something like this, just as a security blanket, but it does do a fine job. So I'm going to, and you can see how the threads are a little loose. This is, again, when I would rather have a cotton thread because I just think it looks nicer. That's just the facts. Okay, I'm going to pull my threads to the back. I take off my glasses because my face hurts and then I can't see. So my little threads, I'm going to take all of these to each other, taking one set to the other set. This is where you really want to have long tails. Did they want to see the demise of downtown shopping? What day would have come like those 2 reasons for moving to West County? It could have people's bank have interested. There. And now I can trim those threads, and I have one button sewn on. ready to go. And you need to have it loose so that there's room when you button it, for the depth of the fabric. If it's too tight, your buttonholes will buckle. There. Okay, after I get the rest of these buttons on, I'm going to do one more quick pressing and I'll meet you over and we'll see how it looks. Okay, I have thoughts. I love this pattern. It's so cute and it's really not hard to put together. It would be a great entry-level shirt pattern, especially if you're comfortable or want to start trying buttonholes and buttons. The little collar is really cute. I like everything about it. I have one issue, and that is I think I chose the wrong size. So I'm going to back up. It fits okay, but it's a little snugger than I'd like. I don't have the bottom button buttoned, and you can see this is too tight. It does not lay the way I need it to lay for my body. So if I were doing this again, I would do two things, and this is totally specific to, the figure. For me, I would do the full bust front instead of doing the just swinging out the way I did. I'm definitely going to make this again, do the full bust front and go even larger in the back hip. The front hangs, if you look at the side seam, let me see which direction do I need to go, this way. The side seam hangs straight. If you see this little pull, that's just a Dolman sleeve, like that's just life. That's because there's a big curve right there, but the side seam hangs straight. All of the fullness that I need a little tiny bit in the bust, not much, but just a little bit, but I need a lot back here, which I always do. I did increase for that, but see when I stand to the side, you can see this little, see that it needs multiple inches. So I definitely want to make this again. I want to make it larger. I want to do the full bust, and I want to do fuller hip in the back only. So the front, I'm completely happy with how it fits up here. The extra large is great. I need a fuller bust in the front, and I need a lot more hip in the back. These are personal issues, though. Has nothing to do with the pattern itself. It is my choosing, and I regret that I didn't go ahead and just trace off a full bust front. So next time when you see me wear another one, I like everything else I chose. I like doing the little bias collar, I think is super cute, which is flipped. There we go. Little bias collar I think is really cute. I like the little bias pocket. I like the bias on the sleeve. All of that's great. So super sad about this. And there is a fix that I probably won't do. I'll just be honest. But I could split the seam and put a gusset in here, and it would increase the hip. So that would definitely be an easy fix. I did see that people were wearing it tied, which I just don't think I ever would do. I might wear it tucked in, however, and if I did tuck it in, that would take care of some of this issue back here. I have a really cute red skirt. I could see putting this with a red skirt and wearing it that way. So really love the pattern. The directions are great. 100% press the shoulder seam to the front when you're getting ready to do all the work so that it works out properly. Thanks so much for sewing with me today. Let me know if you've already sewn this up or if it's one that's in line to be sewn soon. I will see you next week for another fun video. If you found this video helpful, informative, or just entertaining, please consider leaving a like, subscribing, and maybe giving me a hype.